For reasons his physicians couldn't fathom, the elderly killer had developed a pronounced limp in his right leg. No one except the members of Majestic 12 knew that the smoking killer had used a more vicious version of the CIA's programming technique to make Jack Ruby shoot the poor patsy that had been set up to take the blame for Kennedy's assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee was a purblind fool whom the CIA had been using for years. He was so stupid that he thought he'd be able to penetrate Soviet intelligence when the CIA asked him to renounce his citizenship and move to the USSR, under deep cover. Actually, his entry had been a diversion for a deeper penetration that the CIA was planning. Under a sort of gentleman's agreement, the Russian government allowed him to emigrate and live in Moscow. The Soviet government were running deep moles of their own and didn't want to overly excite the American government at the time. After his usefulness was ended in Soviet Russia, his controllers pulled him back to the United States for reassignment. Majestic 12 picked up his dossier and knew they had the perfect patsy for a high-level assassination when they needed one. He was an ex-Marine, so everyone would naturally believe he was an expert with a rifle even though his records indicated that he was a lousy shot at any range with any sort of weapon. All that was needed for him was to be in the right place at the right time for him to be blamed. Then he would be killed by a CIA-controlled sociopath and no one would be the wiser. Majestic 12 had agents within both the CIA and the FBI. Any evidence that failed to correspond with their manufactured truth would disappear as certainly as John Kennedy's bullet-riddled brain would disappear from the Dallas coroner's morgue. The termination of the woman and child went off without a hitch. It had been child's play to rig the side tank of the pickup to split on impact and dump gasoline all over the road. The driver was a nobody who no one would miss. He had been a down-and-out alcoholic construction worker who had lost all of his friends and family to the bottle. He had subsisted from day to day, eking out a living as a day worker at a temp agency that specialized in single-day jobs for the barely employable. The only things of value he had managed to retain from his former life were a few of his carpenter's tools and his old pickup truck. It wasn't difficult to find a near bum to be a disposable assassin by promising him steady work, nor was it arduous to drug him and reprogram his already sodden brain into slamming his truck into the target car at the correct moment. The flames destroyed both the assassin and his tiny victim. The impact had killed the woman instantly. There was no evidence that any crime had been committed. It was only another MVA. For the smoking killer, it was all in a day's work. Fortunately for the sitting President of the United States, his assassination wasn't necessary for Majestic 12's plans. The downhill slide of the Pacific Rim economy changed everything. Even the President, who was widely reported to be a waffling, womanizing, draft dodger, became tough on the public. Unfortunately for Majestic 12's plans for world domination, control of the American public became impossible when the millennium arrived. After the IRS debacle of the year 2000, the American public had had enough and had become positively dangerous. When the IRS computers collapsed due to the Y2K syndrome, year 2000, none of the returns for the year 2000 could be processed. By 1998, it had fallen short of its plans to fix the year 2000 problem on 6 of 127 of its most vital systems, and the price tag for the program patches and chip replacements had zoomed from $250 million to $1 billion. By the year 2000, they had managed to fix only 73 of its network servers, and the balance of the improperly programmed servers crashed catastrophically on January 1, 2000. Nothing could be processed, returns were stalled, audits became impossible, and the refunds and the earned income credit that people needed to pay bills went unpaid to deserving citizens. Not that the government was broke, far from it. Money was pouring into government coffers from corporations who had foreseen the problem and updated their software years before, but the government's ability to analyze tax returns or disburse monies was crippled. The computers of the Treasury's Department of Financial Management Services, which disbursed checks for Social Security as well as Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans' benefits, had not had a single upgrade and went down completely. Oldsters and youngsters alike went hungry, homes were lost, and all the government would permit was to declare that it had sovereign immunity for its negligence. The public was livid. Regional IRS offices were bombed and/or attacked by angry mobs. The Congressional mail server went down as the server became flooded with literally billions of angry email messages from the citizenry. When local offices of the FBI attempted to investigate the IRS bombings, their offices were bombed as well. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration, attempted to convince the president to revoke the Constitution and impose a dictatorship under its mandate to assume absolute control of the country in a time of national emergency, but the president refused. The executive office had long-term plans that it wanted to be kept secret from the enemies of the state. Concentration camps and disposal facilities were being constructed secretly to deal with the nonconformists and ne'er-do-wells that the government had on its hit list. When the time came, FEMA would be called upon to invoke the emergency provisions of its mandate that would enable martial law be legally declared. In the interim, the government was quite happy with the chaos that filled the void. The chaos that was enveloping the nation would make it that much easier to effect a total dictatorship when the time was right.